Hello fellas, and Files Film Guru here. For those new to the channel, my name's Sean, also known as Film Guru, and I started this channel, I have my particular style of movies and a variety of film content, so thanks for joining me today. Today I'm reviewing Ari Asters' new film, Beau was Afraid. This was also written by him and stars Joaquin Phoenix. The film follows the story of Beau, played by Joaquin Phoenix, a middle-aged man who's afraid of everything, terrified in fact. He's scared to go outside, he's scared to be involved with anybody. There's so much fear and worry in him about the world outside. Following the sudden death of his mother, he heads off to go to her funeral, but only gets swept up in a Homer Odyssey kite story. He goes on his own journey, his own odyssey, to get to where he's going. All these things happen to him along the way which shape him and form him into the person he becomes by the end of the film. And it also shapes the people around him. And we get a real sense of who he is throughout the film, with all these incidents and things that happen to him that he has to overcome and keep persevering to get to where he needs to get. Look, this is going to be a bit of an analyst video, so I'm going to go into some spoilers. So if you haven't seen this film, probably not best to watch this, but if you don't care about spoilers, then continue watching. I'm a big fan of Ari Aster. I think he's a very original and unique director. He's out there doing something very different. I put him in the realm of Robert Eggers and Brandon Cronenberg and these young filmmakers who are coming out and making some really interesting films. Ari Aster hooked me from the beginning with Hereditary. What an extraordinary film, and I still think that's his best film. Midsommar and Beau was Afraid are great as well, but it's just something about him starting with that film. Everything was perfectly done in that movie, and he spent many years creating that, where the other two felt they were created a bit quicker than the amount of time he spent on the first film. This is quite an extraordinary film. Yes, it is very long, and people have been turned off by the length of the film. It is 3 hours. And I must admit, when first going into this film, I was a bit not sure how I felt about it. I felt the first part of the film I didn't love, but only when he gets hit by a car and taken in by this married couple, who are a bit strange and odd, is where the film sort of picked up for me, and then the journey he continues on. And ultimately, when I got to the end of the movie, everything made sense, everything served a purpose, and I enjoyed the first part of it, and I really loved the film by the end. I just thought it was quite an extraordinary, eye-opening, confronting, and sometimes terrifying film, and I loved that. I loved the unsettlingness. I love movies like this that sort of play with your emotions and your mind and get you to think about things, and ultimately get you to analyze the movie and see what they were really talking about. And of course, the cast is solid, but of course, Joaquin Phoenix is phenomenal here. I haven't seen him play a character that's so introverted and so quiet and so he's a very sympathetic character. He's nice to people when they're mean to him, and you feel for him and when these bad things happen, because you're not quite sure why they're happening to him, and you just really care for him and you want to protect him, and which is an interesting thing on Ari Aster's part in creating the character, but also Joaquin's performance and what he provides and gives to the character and breathes life into this very fascinating man who's gone through a lot of trauma in his life, and he's trying to make sense of it. And of course, visually striking. What a wonderful film. Like, just his concept and ideas about each sequence. There's a sequence that takes place in the forest that's beautifully done, where he runs into this theatre group of putting on a production. He imagined himself as the main character, and we go on this journey, and all the sets are sort of crafted and created out of wood and like you would see on a stage. And then there's the use of animation, and just quite a journey this character goes on in this little sequence. And of course, the ending, the last 30 minutes, is really shocking and surprising. It hits you, it punches you right in the stomach, and you don't quite know what to make of it to begin with. And like the rest of the film, it's a film you really have to sit with to make sense of, because there's so much in it, so much going on, that you really start to have to piece it together and to make sense of it. Okay, so my theories about this film is that the first part of the film, we're inside of his head. Everything we see is from Beau's point of view, and it's all heightened. It's a sort of heightened, it only is Beau's skewed perception of reality. The film first opens up and we see this street he lives on, and this apartment, and all these things happening, a lot of violence and negativity and terrible things happening. I think that's all heightened. I think we're inside of his head, and we see his anxieties exaggerated. So everything we see is so exaggerated. The people outside, the people he thinks are trying to get him, just the environment he finds himself in, all these strange things that start to happen to him, where a guy keeps knocking on his door and sliding notes under his door telling him to turn down music where there is no music, and then ultimately turns on music himself. It's really odd. And then you hear the noises and the craziness of outside. The reason I think we're inside of his head too is because if you watch the film, there's a lot of negativity, there's a lot of advertisement, billboards and such, and it's all really negative stuff of his perception of what that sign is ultimately saying. And this is throughout the film. There's all these moments that are kind of a bit twisted and turned into a way that isn't quite reality, but it's just how he perceives the things he's experiencing and seeing. Like I said, the film ultimately picks up this married couple, Amy Ryan and Nathan Lane, picking him up, taking him back to their house and patching him up because they accidentally run him over and he got stabbed by this crazy guy with a knife. But when he gets back to the house, he doesn't quite know what's happening. They're treating him like he's part of the family. He doesn't know why. And then they have a daughter who hates him. She's so much full of anger and sadness and violence. And the way she treats Beau is quite terrible. But I think we see these people as nice and caring people, but I think it's still inside of his head. It's still his perception of these people. So they're not probably what we think they are. And ultimately, when you get to the end of the film, you find out these two people are actually actors, and they were performing for his mother. There's a whole twisted storyline with his mother. I loved all this. We get to see his relationship with her in bits and pieces throughout the film, and we see it on a boat, and we see what she's really like and what she really does. The whole journey he goes on is a manipulation by his mother, and that's quite confronting as we go through the film. As he's trying to get through it and escapes, like I mentioned, he ends up in the forest. This young pregnant girl helps him, and I think she represents what he wants. He wants a family. He wants to become a parent, but he's never had that ability because of his fears and anxieties have held him back from embracing life and becoming who he really wants to be. She leads him to this acting troupe, and there's a stage set up and they put on this production, and he imagines himself in the story as he goes on this journey dressed like the main character in the story, and he goes on this journey that's full of sadness and regret. Like, it's about this man's journey who meets this woman and has children, then this storm comes and he loses them, and then he spends the rest of his time just searching and searching for them. And I think this is a representation of Beau searching for the things he really wants, and searching for the things he hasn't experienced or really desires to have. And there's so many odd and extraordinary things that happen to him, and the people he interacts with, some of them are really nice and great, and some of them are chaotic and crazy. And you're not quite sure, like he is, to how to make sense of them. But like I mentioned, the third act of the film is really where it all comes to fruition in a way, and everything makes sense, but it's quite a shocking, disturbing aspect to the movie. He returns to his mother's home. She's in a casket with no head because she got killed by a fan. And he goes and he sees these images and stuff of things that we've seen him in. So photos of him at home that there's no way that she could have got. A big picture of her face with little pictures inside, and each one of them is people he met across his journey that were obviously actors, who are all obviously part of his mother's ultimate plan. There is a sex scene in this film that is quite shocking, because it's like he has this fear. His mother always put into him this fear of if he had sex at all, he would kill that person. And that ultimately was her condemning his father and condemning the act of having sex. And ultimately, this scene involves Parker posing, and ultimately he has sex and he thinks everything's fine. He looks up and she's dead, and she's skewed and twisted and turned, and then she's ultimately carried away, and you're just like, what the actual fuck is going on? What the hell is happening in this movie? What is this all about? Then the big twist in the film. His mother, she appears, she's still alive. It was all a plan and a performance in a way to punish him for not coming home when she wanted him to. She ultimately kills the housekeeper and gives her family money so they can survive. And it's all about torment and torture. His therapist appears, who's ultimately been recording everything and showing his mother. And she starts to attack and condemn him and make him feel small and pathetic. My mouth open the whole way through because I didn't quite understand what it was about. But as I thought about it, I felt that he felt his father was a big dick. We were very literal about it, but like I said before, I still think we're inside of his head, and his perception to reality are skewed and much more extreme than the reality of the circumstances he finds him. It is ultimately punishment by his mother, who has a deep hatred for him and has had a hatred for him ever since he was born. And she manipulated and tortured him and treated him and shaped him into this fearful, anxiety-driven man who can't function in society because of it. And she just pushes him too far, and he ultimately strangles her. In this moment, I just was completely with him, going, yes, she deserves to be punished for the things she's done. Then the film goes into this whole, he's in a boat and he's in this, Colosseum in the water, and there's all these people around judging him, and he's put on trial, and he feels guilty. I think this is all a guilt that he feels. Ultimately, he's really broken and damaged by the end of the movie, that he imagined himself being punished and put on trial for the way he's acted or treated people. But it's all inside of his head. In my opinion, he only takes his own life to punish himself. The film is quite extraordinary in that regard. There's so many levels. There's a depth to it that you can't see when you first see it, and you really got to think about the movie. And I think a lot of people are missing the point about this film. It's really Ari Asters' other two films, Hereditary and Midsommar. It's about relationships. It's about parents and children, and the bond that is formed between mother and son, but also how the way that parent acts can affect the child and stunt their development and growth. And it's really about how extreme some parents are to punish their children because they feel they are neglecting them. It's just there's a psychological element that seems to be Ari Aster's bag, and I really think it's a very fascinating film. And after thinking about it for quite some time, it's going on my top 10 of the year because it is just so original, unique, and refreshing. And I look forward to what he does next, and I hope we get more of this because he's such a fascinating, unique director. Final thoughts. In the end, it's really about a one-man's journey and the growth that he goes on in that journey. Like Homer's The Odyssey, Beau, he goes on his own odyssey, and he is manipulated and shaped by the people and experiences that he has. And it's about how detrimental a toxic relationship between mother and son can really become, and Beau's search for who he is and his place in the world. I'm going to give Beau's Afraid 4.5 out of 5. I was really impressed with it. I do highly recommend it, especially if you like his other two films. It's not going to be for everyone, but people who like something different and Ari Aster will get a lot out of this. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit subscribe. Down the bottom, follow me on Facebook and Letterboxd. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.